Lars Mikkelsen, a very rich and divorced workaholic businessman, invites Ingrid Solberg, his son's new kindergarten teacher, out. A new chance for love? Will a man trapped in his past find the courage to open his heart again and discover the true meaning of happiness? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Lars Mikkelsen sat behind his enormous mahogany desk, a fortress of paperwork rising around him like an impenetrable wall. The gleam of the polished surface reflected the afternoon sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his opulent office in Oslo. A soft hum of phone calls and the distant clatter of heels on marble created a cacophony that was both familiar and suffocating. He absent-mindedly shuffled through the documents, each one a reminder of the empire he had built. But despite the trophies of his success, an emptiness gnawed at him. His mind drifted, unbidden, to thoughts of his son, Lucas. The little boy, barely 5, had burst into the house the previous evening, excitement spilling from him like a fountain. "Dad, you won't believe it. My new teacher is so cool. Her name is Miss Solberg." Lars could still hear the enthusiasm in Lucas's voice, the way his eyes sparkled with the joy of discovery. Yet, as he recalled that moment, Lars felt a pang of guilt. He had been so wrapped up in work that he had barely noticed the small joys in his son's life. "Mr. Mikkelsen?" His assistant's voice pulled him from his reverie. Anna stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of concern and professionalism. "You have a meeting in 15 minutes with the marketing team, right?" he replied, straightening in his chair and forcing a smile. "Thanks, Anna." But as she left, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing touch with what truly mattered. Lars leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, and allowed himself a moment to think about Lucas's teacher. Ingrid Solberg, the name echoed softly in his mind, as if it held some significance he couldn't quite grasp. He had met her briefly during a parent-teacher meeting, and she had left an impression. The way she had engaged with the children, her laughter lighting up the room, had been infectious. But he dismissed the thought, returning to the spreadsheets and projections that had become all-consuming. As the clock ticked away, Lars's thoughts wandered back to the fleeting moments when he had felt alive. It had been years since his marriage had crumbled, leaving him to navigate the complexities of single parenthood and the demands of his career. The weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily on him, and the loneliness had seeped into his bones. He could feel the hollow ache in his chest as he contemplated the life he had built. It was as if he was running a race with no finish line in sight. Meanwhile, across town, Ingrid Solberg was immersed in a different kind of chaos. The kindergarten classroom buzzed with the energy of children, each one vying for her attention, their tiny voices overlapping in a symphony of innocence and joy. Ingrid knelt beside a group of children painting at a messy table, her heart swelling with warmth as she watched their creativity spill across the paper. "Look at that, Emma. You've made a rainbow," she exclaimed, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Can I take it home, Miss Solberg?" Emma asked, her face beaming with pride. "Of course. It's beautiful," Ingrid replied, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. But beneath her cheerful demeanor, a shadow lurked. The memory of her recent breakup loomed over her like a dark cloud, casting doubts on her self-worth. Feeling unworthy of love and connection, she often pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the joy she could bring to her students. Yet, as the day wore on, the weight of her sadness crept back in. She often found herself staring out of the large windows, watching the world pass by, feeling as if she were an outsider looking in. Her friends had encouraged her to move on, to find someone new, but every time she thought of dating again, a knot formed in her stomach. Could she really open her heart to someone after what she had been through? When the final bell rang, Ingrid packed up her materials, her heart heavy with lingering doubts. The children rushed out, their laughter echoing in the hallway, but she felt detached from their joy. As she stepped outside, the crisp air filled her lungs, invigorating her spirit just a bit. She needed to remind herself that she was strong, that she could find happiness again, if she allowed herself to. Later that evening, while Lars prepared to pick up Lucas from kindergarten, he found himself replaying the brief exchange he had had with Ingrid. There had been something about her, an energy, a light that seemed to draw him in. He shook his head, dismissing the thought as he slipped into his tailored jacket. "What are you doing, Lars?" he muttered to himself. "You're a busy man. Focus on Lucas." The drive to the kindergarten was filled with the usual thoughts of work and responsibilities. Yet, a flicker of curiosity about Ingrid remained, a small ember of intrigue that refused to be extinguished. When he arrived, he spotted Lucas by the swings, chatting animatedly with his friends. Lars's heart swelled with pride. His son was a bright light in the otherwise chaotic world he inhabited. "Hey, buddy," Lars called, walking toward Lucas, who immediately ran to him with open arms. "Dad, you won't believe what we did today," Lucas exclaimed, tugging at Lars's hand. As they turned to walk toward the parking lot, a familiar figure caught Lars's eye. Ingrid stood a few feet away, speaking with a parent. Her hair glinted in the fading sunlight, and the joy radiating from her was palpable even from a distance. For a moment, time seemed to slow as their eyes met. There was a spark, an unspoken connection that lingered between them like a delicate thread. Lars cleared his throat, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. He hadn't felt this way in years. "Lucas, why don't you go play on the slide for a moment?" he suggested, watching his son scamper off with a grin. He took a step closer to Ingrid, his heart racing. "Miss Solberg," he said, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. "I'm Lars, Lucas's father. We met briefly at the parent-teacher meeting." "Ingrid," she replied, her smile genuine and warm. "It's nice to see you again. Lucas has been raving about you," Lars continued, feeling emboldened by her friendly demeanor. "He really enjoys your class. I love teaching him and the other kids," Ingrid said, her eyes sparkling. "They bring so much joy into my life." An awkward silence settled between them, yet it felt charged with possibility. Lars glanced at his son, who was engrossed in playing, and then back at Ingrid. "I was wondering," he began hesitantly, "if you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? Just to chat? I'd love to hear more about what you do." Ingrid looked taken aback for a moment, her expression shifting from surprise to uncertainty. "Oh," she said, her voice soft. "I'm not sure if that would be appropriate. I mean, I'm your son's teacher." "Right, of course," Lars replied quickly, feeling a pang of embarrassment. "But I think it would be nice to get to know each other, outside of school. Just as adults." She considered his words, her brow furrowing slightly. "I guess that's true," she conceded slowly. "I'd like that." Lars felt a rush of exhilaration at her response. "Great. How about tomorrow afternoon?" "Tomorrow works for me," she said, a tentative smile breaking through her earlier hesitation. They exchanged numbers, and as Ingrid walked away, Lars watched her go, a sense of hope blooming in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of excitement. He had reached out, and perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something new. As he turned to Lucas, who was now climbing the slide with unrestrained joy, Lars realized that he was ready to explore the possibilities that lay ahead, even amidst the chaos of his life. Lars and Ingrid settled into a small cafe, the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans wafting through the air, mingling with the sounds of light chatter and the clinking of cups. The cafe was cozy, with wooden beams overhead and warm lighting that created an inviting atmosphere. As they took their seats at a corner table, Lars felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This wasn't just another business meeting. It was a date, a chance to connect with someone who had unexpectedly ignited a spark in him. "So, how do you like being a kindergarten teacher?" Lars asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious about her world. He absent-mindedly stirred his coffee, glancing up at Ingrid, who sat across from him, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of enthusiasm and slight shyness. Ingrid smiled, her cheeks slightly flushed. "It's the most rewarding job I could have chosen. Every day is an adventure," she began, her voice animated. "I love seeing the world through their eyes. They're so curious and full of imagination. Just yesterday, we built a spaceship out of cardboard boxes. You should have seen their faces when they lifted off." Lars chuckled, picturing the scene. "I can only imagine. It must be a joy to inspire them." Ingrid nodded, her expression turning more contemplative. "It's more than just teaching them letters and numbers. I want to instill a sense of wonder and creativity. But it can be challenging too." "Challenging how?" Lars inquired, his interest piqued. She hesitated for a moment, fiddling with her cup. "Sometimes, it feels like the world around them is so harsh. I want to protect their innocence, but I know that's not possible. They face their own struggles, even at that young age." Lars could sense an underlying sadness in her words, a hint of vulnerability that beckoned him to dig deeper. "You sound passionate about it. What drove you to become a teacher?" Ingrid took a deep breath, her gaze drifting momentarily to the window where rain began to patter softly against the glass. "I've always loved working with children, but honestly, it was also about healing. After my last relationship ended, I needed to find a way to fill a void. Teaching gave me purpose, a way to channel my energy into something meaningful." Lars felt a pang of empathy. He understood the weight of emotional scars, having carried his own since his divorce. "It sounds like you've found a way to turn pain into something beautiful." Ingrid looked back at him, her eyes locking onto his. "That's one way to put it. I guess we all have our battles, don't we?" "Yeah, we do," Lars replied, his voice softer, as he reflected on the tumultuous years since his marriage fell apart. "I've been so consumed by work that I've neglected parts of my life that matter. It's easy to get lost in the chaos." Ingrid studied him for a moment, a knowing look in her eyes. "You seem like someone who's accomplished a lot, but do you ever feel like something's missing?" Lars shifted slightly in his seat, contemplating her words. "Every day, I've built a successful business, but I often feel like I'm just going through the motions. It's exhausting." He paused, deciding to share more. "After my divorce, I threw myself into work to avoid dealing with the loneliness. It was easier to bury myself in numbers and meetings than to confront my emotions." "That's understandable," Ingrid said, her voice gentle. "We all cope in different ways, but you should allow yourself to feel. It's okay to be vulnerable." Lars raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her perspective. "You speak like someone who knows what it's like to face those feelings head-on." Ingrid's expression darkened momentarily. "I've had my share of heartbreaks. It's not easy to open up again after being hurt, but I've learned that vulnerability can lead to real connections, even if it's scary." "Scary, indeed," Lars admitted, a small smile creeping onto his face. "But sitting here with you feels different. I haven't felt this way in a long time." Ingrid returned his smile, her cheeks warming again. "That's nice to hear. I feel a connection too. It's refreshing to talk about these things instead of the superficial chatter that usually fills conversations." As their coffees cooled, they continued to share stories, laughter flowing easily between them. Lars found himself captivated by Ingrid's passion for life and her ability to find joy in the simplest of things. He admired her resilience and the way she approached challenges with a sense of hope. When the waitress came to clear their empty cups, Lars glanced at his watch, realizing time had flown by. "I should probably walk you to your car," he said, reluctantly rising from his seat. "It's getting late." Ingrid nodded, her eyes sparkling. "I'd like that." As they stepped outside into the cool Norwegian evening, the soft drizzle had turned into a gentle rain. Lars pulled his jacket tighter around him, glancing at Ingrid, who seemed unfazed by the weather, her hair slightly damp but her spirit undiminished. They walked side by side, the rhythmic sound of their footsteps blending with the rain. The air was fresh and invigorating, and Lars felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through him. "You know," he began, breaking the comfortable silence, "I didn't expect our conversation to flow so easily. It's been a while since I've connected with someone like this." Ingrid looked up, the streetlights casting a warm glow on her face. "Me too. It's rare to find someone who's willing to be genuine." As they approached her car, Lars felt a strange tension building between them, an unspoken question hanging in the air. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to navigate the moment. "Would you like to do this again sometime?" Ingrid's smile widened, her eyes bright with possibility. "I'd love that." "Great," he replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. Just as Ingrid reached for her car door, Lars took a step closer, compelled by a sudden urge to bridge the gap between them. Ingrid. Yes? She turned to face him, her expression curious. Can I kiss you? The words tumbled out before he could second-guess himself. Her breath hitched slightly, and she nodded, a shy smile spreading across her face. Yes, I would like that. Lars leaned in, their lips meeting softly, a spark igniting as the world around them faded into the background. It was tentative at first, but the warmth of their connection deepened the kiss, leaving both of them breathless. When they finally pulled away, they lingered in the moment, their foreheads touching, sharing a smile that spoke volumes. But as the excitement settled, Lars felt a rush of anxiety wash over him. He had opened a door to possibilities he had long kept shut, and now he was faced with the reality of what that meant. Good night, Lars, Ingrid said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as she stepped back. Good night, Ingrid, he replied, his heart racing. He watched as she slid into her car, their eyes locking for just a moment longer before she drove away, leaving him standing in the rain, feeling exhilarated yet apprehensive about the path ahead. Back at his office, the silence enveloped him as he sat at his desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his face. Yet, despite the familiar chaos of paperwork stacked high around him, he found it hard to concentrate. His mind replayed the evening, the warmth of Ingrid's laughter, the spark between them, and the hesitation that lingered when they said goodbye. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Why was he feeling so anxious? He had been so eager for this connection, yet now that it was real, he felt overwhelmed. The weight of his past and the uncertainty of the future loomed large in his mind. Lars leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. It had been so long since he allowed himself to feel anything beyond the confines of his work. The walls he had built around his heart were beginning to crack, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay beyond them. But as he considered Ingrid, the way she spoke about her students, the light in her eyes, the warmth of her smile, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps it was time to embrace the chaos of his emotions, to step outside of his comfort zone. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for happiness again. With renewed determination, Lars grabbed a pen and began jotting down thoughts, ideas for what he could do next. He needed to reach out, to explore this connection further. After years of solitude, he yearned for something real, and Ingrid might just be the one to help him rediscover that lost part of himself. As the hours passed, the rain outside eased, but Lars's resolve only grew stronger. He would pursue this new connection, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, he felt alive, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and the relationship between Lars Mikkelsen and Ingrid Solberg blossomed in the midst of their complex lives. Each meeting felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to escape the burdens they both carried. Lars found himself smiling more often, his heart lighter as he navigated the intricacies of his growing feelings for Ingrid. He had even introduced her to his son, Lucas, and the little boy had taken to her instantly. One crisp evening, as they sat together in Lars's spacious living room, the sound of laughter echoed through the air. Lucas was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a myriad of colorful toys. Ingrid sat cross-legged next to him, engaged in a game that involved stacking blocks into precarious towers. Lars watched from the couch, a warm smile on his face as he observed the joy radiating from both of them. Careful, Lucas. If you add that block there, it might topple over, Ingrid warned, her voice playful yet filled with genuine concern. Lucas giggled, his blue eyes wide with excitement. No way. I can make it taller. With determination, he placed another block on the tower, and for a moment, it seemed as if the structure would hold. As Lars watched the two of them, he felt a swell of pride. Ingrid had a way with Lucas that was nothing short of magical. She brought a sense of warmth and nurturing to his son's world, something Lars had feared would be lost forever after his divorce. Look, Dad. Look what we made, Lucas exclaimed, his little face beaming with pride as he pointed to the precarious tower that now reached a dizzying height. Impressive, Lars responded, his eyes sparkling with admiration. Just don't bump the table, or it'll all come crashing down." He chuckled, and Ingrid shot him a playful glare. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Lars," she teased, trying to suppress a laugh. "Lucas and I have this under control, right?" "Right." Lucas chimed in, nodding vigorously. As the evening wore on, they settled into a comfortable routine. They shared dinner, simple pasta and salad, but it felt like a feast in the warmth of each other's company. Lars noticed how Ingrid effortlessly connected with Lucas, asking him about his day, engaging him in stories, and making him laugh. Later, as they cleaned up the dishes, Lars felt a surge of vulnerability. He wanted to share more of himself with Ingrid, to let her into the depths of his heart. "Ingrid," he began, hesitating as he dried a plate, "you've really made a difference in Lucas's life, and mine too. I never thought I could feel this way again after everything." Ingrid paused, her hands stilling in the soapy water. She turned to face him, her expression softening. "I feel the same, Lars. It's like I can breathe again. You and Lucas have brought joy back into my life." A silence enveloped them, thick with understanding. Lars took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I know things are moving fast, but I can't help but think about the future. About us." Ingrid bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I want that too, but I can't shake this feeling. Sometimes I wonder if I truly belong in your world." Her voice was barely above a whisper, revealing the insecurities that had begun to gnaw at her. "What do you mean?" Lars asked, concern etching his features. "I mean, your life is so different. You're successful, wealthy, and I'm just a kindergarten teacher. I worry that I'm not enough for you, that your world is too big for me to fit into." Lars reached out, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. "Ingrid, it's not about what you have or don't have. It's about who you are. You make me feel alive, and Lucas adores you. That's all that matters to me." She searched his eyes for sincerity, and as he held her gaze, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "I want to believe that," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "But my past, it lingers. I've been hurt before, and I don't want to feel that way again." "Neither do I," Lars replied, his voice firm yet tender. "But I promise you, I am here for you. We can face the past together. You're worth it." Ingrid's heart swelled at his words. "You don't know how much that means to me, Lars. I've always been the one to hold back, to protect myself. But with you, I feel like I'm starting to let go of that fear." A comfortable silence settled between them, and Lars took a step back, allowing the weight of their conversation to linger in the air. They resumed washing the dishes, but the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken promises. Later that night, as they settled onto the couch, Lars turned on a movie, but neither of them paid much attention to the screen. Instead, they shared quiet conversations, laughter, and more moments of vulnerability. Ingrid often found herself leaning into Lars, drawn to his warmth like a moth to a flame. "You know," Lars said, breaking a comfortable silence, "I've never been good at relationships. My ex-wife, she made me question everything about love." Ingrid nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I can relate to that. My last relationship left me feeling lost. I didn't think I'd ever find someone who could see me for who I truly am." "What do you mean?" Lars asked, genuinely curious. "I mean, my ex was always focused on what I could do for him. My looks, my job. He never really cared about my dreams or my feelings. It was suffocating." Lars frowned, his heart aching for her. "You deserve someone who appreciates you, Ingrid. Someone who values your passion and kindness." She smiled softly, feeling the sincerity in his words. "Thank you, Lars. I'm trying to believe that." As the night wore on, they fell into a comfortable silence, the flickering light from the television casting a warm glow around them. Lars couldn't help but steal glances at Ingrid, captivated by her beauty and the way she seemed to light up even the darkest corners of his life. But as days turned into weeks, the insecurities that had lingered in Ingrid's mind began to resurface more frequently. She watched Lars move through his world, attending business meetings, mingling with influential people, and living a lifestyle that felt so foreign to her. Each time he mentioned an event or a gathering, a knot formed in her stomach. One evening, As they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Ingrid couldn't hold back her feelings any longer. "Lars, can we talk about something?" she asked, her voice edged with tension. "Of course. What's on your mind?" he replied, setting aside the glass of wine he had been sipping. "I've been feeling out of place in your world. I love spending time with you and Lucas, but sometimes I just can't shake this feeling of inadequacy." Lars's expression shifted to one of concern. "Ingrid, I never want you to feel that way. You belong here, with us. You're part of our lives now. But what if I can't keep up? What if I can't fit into the life you've built?" Her voice quivered with emotion, and Lars felt his heart break for her. "Listen to me," he said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "You are not just a kindergarten teacher to me. You're incredible, and I love who you are. I want you to be yourself, not someone you think I need." Ingrid felt the weight of his words, but doubt still lingered. "What if I'm not enough for you?" "Enough?" Lars echoed, incredulous. "Ingrid, you are more than enough. I invite you into my world because I want you there, not because of any status or wealth. It's about connection. It's about us." As they sat in the glow of the city lights, Ingrid felt a warmth blossom in her chest. The fear that had gripped her slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps they could navigate their worlds together, and perhaps love could indeed conquer the insecurities that threatened to tear them apart. "I want to believe you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of the city. "You should," Lars replied, reaching for her hand, "because I'm not going anywhere. I choose you, Ingrid." In that moment, as their fingers intertwined, Ingrid felt a flicker of hope ignite anew. She realized that love was not just about fitting into a mold, but rather about embracing each other's differences and building something beautiful together. With that thought, she leaned into him, allowing the warmth of his embrace to envelop her. Together, they sat in comfortable silence, both knowing that while challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, one step at a time. Lars Mikkelsen sat at his desk, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. The soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated the stacks of paperwork that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. He stared blankly at the documents, but his mind was elsewhere, on Ingrid Solberg and the warmth she brought into his life. Just when he thought he could finally let go of the chaos that came with being a divorced father and a businessman, his phone rang. The sharp trill sliced through his thoughts, and he instinctively braced himself for the news he was sure would follow. It was his ex-wife, Astrid. He could already hear the edge of her voice, sharp and cutting, as he answered the call. "Lars," she began, her tone dripping with a mixture of authority and indignation. "We need to talk about Lucas." "What about Lucas?" he replied, trying to keep his voice steady but feeling the familiar stirrings of tension in his chest. He was well aware that any conversation with Astrid had the potential to spiral out of control. "I think it's time to adjust the alimony," she stated bluntly, as if it were a simple request rather than a demand laced with emotional manipulation. "You've been doing quite well since the divorce. Don't you think it's only fair?" Lars clenched his jaw, feeling anger bubble within him. He had worked hard to establish his business after their marriage fell apart, and now it seemed he was being punished for his success. "Astrid, the alimony has already been set. We agreed on this in court. But I can't make ends meet, Lars. You know how expensive it is to raise a child in this city. I need more to support Lucas properly," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You want him to have the best, don't you? You should care about his well-being." Lars felt a wave of frustration wash over him. This was the same tactic she had used countless times before, using Lucas as leverage to get what she wanted. "I do care about Lucas, and I'm doing everything I can to provide for him. But this isn't fair, and you know it." He could almost hear her smirk on the other end of the line. "Fairness has nothing to do with it, Lars. You're the wealthy businessman now. I'm just a struggling single mother. Think about it." With a heavy sigh, he hung up the phone, his heart racing. The conversation replayed in his mind like a broken record, each word echoing his feelings of inadequacy and resentment. He could feel the walls closing in around him, the shadows of his past creeping back into the light. Ingrid had brought a welcome distraction from all of this. Her laughter, her kindness, and the way she effortlessly connected with his son, Lucas. He had even dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have a shot at happiness again. But with Astrid's demands looming over him, the threat of losing that happiness felt more real than ever. The next few days passed in a blur. Lars found himself distracted and withdrawn, the weight of his ex-wife's words hanging over him like a storm cloud. Despite Ingrid's attempts to reach out, he found it difficult to focus on anything other than the relentless demands of his ex-wife and the fear that this might all fall apart. On a particularly dreary Thursday afternoon, he received a text from Ingrid asking if they could talk. The simple message sent a ripple of anxiety through him. He could sense that she had noticed his change in behavior, and he dreaded the thought of facing her concerns. He met her at a small cafe they frequented, the familiar smell of coffee and pastries filling the air, but the cozy atmosphere felt stifling. Ingrid sat at their usual table, her bright hair catching the light as she looked up at him with concern etched on her face. The moment he sat down, she leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "Lars, what's going on? You've seemed distant lately." He opened his mouth to deny it, to assure her that everything was fine, but the truth weighed heavily on his chest. Instead, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's just, work has been hectic, and I've been dealing with some personal stuff," he admitted, avoiding her gaze. Ingrid's brow furrowed. "You can talk to me, you know. I care about you, Lars. I don't want you to feel like you have to go through this alone." Her words struck a chord in him, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. But then the reality of his situation crashed back in, and he felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. "It's complicated," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about my ex-wife. She's demanding more money, and I feel like I'm being backed into a corner." Ingrid's expression shifted to one of understanding, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "I can't imagine how stressful that must be for you, especially with everything else going on. But you shouldn't let her control your life like this. You deserve to be happy, Lars." He looked up at her then, the weight of her words sinking in. "I've worked so hard to build this life, and now it feels like I'm losing everything. I don't want that to affect us, Ingrid. I don't want you to feel like you're part of this mess." Ingrid reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You're not losing me, Lars. We're in this together. You've got to let me in. I want to help you through this." He felt a swell of emotion rising within him, a mixture of gratitude and fear. "I don't want to burden you with my problems," he confessed, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm scared that if I let you in, you'll see all the chaos I've been trying to hide." "In chaos, we find strength," she replied softly, her gaze steady and reassuring. "You don't have to put on a brave face for me. I want to know you, the real you, not just the successful businessman, but the man who loves his son and is trying to find his way." At that moment, Lars felt a surge of vulnerability. He wanted to tell her everything. The fear of his ex-wife's manipulation, the guilt he felt for not being the perfect father, and the terror of losing the connection they had built together. But as he opened his mouth to speak, hesitation gripped him. "I don't want to push you away," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "I'm just scared that the more you know, the more you'll want to distance yourself from me." Ingrid's expression softened as she leaned closer, her eyes searching his. "You're not pushing me away, Lars. You're just human. We all have our struggles. But I'm here, and I want to be here, no matter how messy things get." That promise hung in the air, heavy and electric, but it was intermingled with a sense of dread. He felt the weight of her words, but the shadow of his ex-wife's threats loomed large. He wanted to pull her closer, to kiss her and forget about the chaos, but doubt gnawed at him. Instead, he found himself leaning back, caught in the tension of the moment. "You deserve someone who can give you all of themselves, not someone who's still dealing with the fallout of their past." Ingrid's eyes flashed with determination. "And you deserve a chance at happiness, Lars. Don't let your ex-wife dictate what you can have in your life. You need to fight for it, for us." The fire in her words ignited something within him, but the fear still lingered. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, but the uncertainty remained. As they sat in the cafe, enveloped in their own world, The storm clouds of his past threatened to overshadow the budding relationship they had cultivated. The moment felt charged, and Lars leaned closer, feeling the pull of attraction between them. "I just wish I could make all of this go away," he murmured, his voice low and sincere. Ingrid's gaze softened, and she whispered, "One step at a time, Lars. We'll get through this together." And with that, they shared a kiss, one filled with passion, longing, and an unspoken promise to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But as they pulled apart, the lingering doubts remained, casting a shadow over their newfound connection. The battle between his chaotic past and the hope of a brighter future was just beginning, and Lars couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. Lars Mikkelsen sat at the edge of his lavishly furnished office, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within him. The walls, adorned with abstract art and framed accolades, felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. He had long been consumed by the demands of his business, but lately, his mind drifted towards Ingrid Solberg. Their moments together, however brief, had ignited a spark of hope that he had thought extinguished following his difficult divorce. Yet, as the days passed, the weight of his ex-wife's threats loomed larger, overshadowing the budding relationship he cherished. He glanced at his phone, the screen lighting up with a message from Ingrid. She wanted to meet later that evening, and a wave of warmth washed over him. He quickly typed back, eager to see her, but a nagging thought clawed at the back of his mind. His ex-wife, Clara, had been relentless in her pursuit of more alimony, her manipulative tactics growing bolder by the day. Lars's heart sank. How could he be a good partner to Ingrid when his past refused to let him go? Later that evening, they met at a quaint little cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. Lars found Ingrid sitting at a corner table, her eyes sparkling like the warm lights strung above them. As he approached, he noted the faint traces of worry etched into her features. He couldn't help but wonder if she sensed the storm brewing in his life. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile as he took a seat across from her. "You look lovely tonight." Ingrid's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Thank you, Lars. I'm glad you could make it." She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her gaze drifting to the window where the evening light faded into darkness. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Lars leaned forward, searching her eyes for answers. Ingrid sighed, her shoulders sagging ever so slightly. I don't know. I feel like there's something weighing on you. I can't shake the feeling that you're not fully present." Lars hesitated, torn between the desire to open up and the instinct to protect her from the chaos of his life. "It's just work," he finally said, forcing a casual tone. "Things have been hectic, you know?" She studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing. "I get that work can be demanding, but I can't help but feel like it's more than that. You seem distant lately." He swallowed hard, the truth lodged in his throat. "It's complicated, Ingrid. I'm just trying to manage a lot of things right now. You can talk to me, Lars. I want to help," she offered, her voice softening. He looked away, his heart heavy with the burden of his secrets. "I appreciate that, really, but I don't want to drag you into my mess. By keeping me at arm's length, you're only making it harder for both of us," she replied, her frustration evident. "I care about you, Lars. I want to be there for you." Lars felt a surge of warmth at her words, yet the shadows of his past loomed larger. "I just don't want you to see me as a failure," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ingrid reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. "You're not a failure. You're a good father and a successful businessman. But you're also a person with feelings and fears. We all have baggage, Lars." Her words struck a chord, but before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the moment. It was Clara, standing at the entrance of the cafe, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Lars. A wave of dread washed over him as she approached their table, a predatory smile on her lips. "Lars," she cooed, feigning surprise. "Fancy seeing you here." Ingrid's expression shifted from concern to confusion, her grip on Lars's hand tightening instinctively. "What do you want, Clara?" Lars's voice was tinged with irritation, but he fought to maintain his composure. Clara leaned in closer, her voice low and conspiratorial. I just came by to remind you about our little arrangement. You know the alimony payment is due soon, right? I could use a little extra this month. Lars clenched his jaw, the anger bubbling beneath the surface. You've made your demands perfectly clear, Clara. I won't be manipulated anymore. Ingrid's eyes darted between the two, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Perhaps we should take this outside, she suggested, her voice steady but laced with tension. No need for that, Clara replied, her tone dripping with condescension. I just wanted to make sure Lars remembers his obligations. It's not like we want to upset little Lucas, do we? Lars's heart raced. The mention of Lucas felt like a dagger, twisting painfully in his chest. You're using our son as a pawn, Clara. It needs to stop. Clara raised an eyebrow, her facade of sweetness slipping. It's all very simple, Lars. You pay what I ask, and I'll ensure Lucas stays happy. Otherwise, well, let's just say I have ways to make things difficult for you. Ingrid stood up, her resolve evident. This isn't right. You can't threaten him like that. Her voice was firm, and for a moment, Lars felt a swell of admiration for her courage. Clara's gaze shifted to Ingrid, surprise flickering in her eyes. And who are you? An assistant? A new fling? Her tone was laced with disdain. I'm someone who cares about Lars and Lucas, Ingrid replied, her voice unwavering. And I won't let you bully them. Lars felt a surge of gratitude towards Ingrid, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Clara's smile was gone, replaced by a cold glare. You think you can just waltz in and play the savior? You have no idea what you're getting into. Enough! Lars shouted, the outburst surprising even himself. I won't let you dictate my life any longer. Ingrid is a wonderful person who deserves my attention and respect, not your petty games. Clara's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. You think you can just cut me off? This is far from over, Lars. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the cafe, leaving Lars and Ingrid in a charged silence. The weight of the confrontation hung heavy in the air, and Lars felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He had stood up for himself for the first time in years, but the fallout was sure to be messy. Ingrid looked at him, her eyes wide with concern. Are you okay? Lars took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. I don't know. I've never stood up to her like that before. You did great, she said softly, her hand still resting on his. But I can see that this is going to be complicated. Are you sure you want to continue this relationship with all that's going on? Lars met her gaze, determination rising within him. I do. I want this. I want you. The words felt liberating as they slipped from his lips. But I need to figure out how to protect what we have. It won't be easy. Ingrid nodded, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. Then let's face it together. I'm not going anywhere, Lars. As they sat in the aftermath of the confrontation, Lars felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. He had fought back, and for the first time, he was willing to confront the shadows of his past, not just for himself but for the future he envisioned with Ingrid and Lucas. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, he felt empowered to take it on. Lars Mikkelsen's heart raced as he stumbled through the winding paths of the park, his breath fogging in the crisp Norwegian air. The confrontation with his ex-wife had left him shaken, but the thought of Ingrid, alone and hurt, propelled him forward. He had to find her. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, and the vibrant autumn leaves crunched under his feet, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in his mind. As he turned a corner, he spotted her, a solitary figure sitting on a bench, her head bowed, shoulders trembling. The sight of her so vulnerable hit him like a punch to the gut. He approached cautiously, his heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Ingrid, he called softly, his voice barely breaking through the chilly air. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. Lars. Her voice was shaky, and the pain in it pierced through him. He rushed to her side, dropping to one knee, desperate to comfort her. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't mean to leave you like that. Ingrid wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to muster a semblance of strength. "You didn't leave me, Lars. You were dealing with your own issues. I just thought we were in this together." The hurt in her eyes was palpable, and he felt a sharp pang of guilt. "I should have told you everything sooner. My ex-wife. She's been manipulating me for years, and I let her. I thought I could protect you from it, but I only ended up pushing you away," he confessed, his voice cracking under the strain of his honesty. Ingrid looked away, her gaze lost in the distance. "I thought I could be strong for you, but it feels like I'm barely holding on. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Lars." He felt a surge of desperation. "Please don't say that. You mean everything to me. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I don't want to lose you. Not now, not ever." He took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his cold fingers. Ingrid searched his eyes for the sincerity she needed to hear. "But what if it gets worse? What if your ex-wife keeps trying to come between us? I don't want to be a source of pain in your life." Lars shook his head fervently. "I won't let her. I promise you. I'll fight this. I'll do whatever it takes to protect us. I've let her control too much of my life for far too long. You deserve more than that, Ingrid. You deserve a partner who fully commits to you, without reservations." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Do you really mean that?" "Absolutely," he said, his voice firm. "I want to build a life with you, to create a family with you and Lucas. I'm done allowing my past to dictate my future. Let's face this together." Ingrid took a deep breath, absorbing his words. The warmth of his hands enveloped hers, grounding her in the moment. "What about my job offer?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "What do you mean?" Lars asked, confused. "I've been offered a position in another city. It's a great opportunity, but I was scared to tell you. With everything that's been happening, I thought it might be best to take it in, start fresh." Her voice trembled, and Lars felt his heart sink at the thought of her leaving. "Is that what you want?" he asked softly, searching her face for answers. "I don't know," she replied, her voice breaking. "Part of me thinks it would be easier to run away from all this. But another part of me, I don't want to leave you or Lucas. I feel at home with you both." Lars felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. "Then why even consider it? You don't have to make a decision today. Let's talk it through. We can figure things out together." Ingrid searched his eyes, the love and determination she saw there filling her with courage. "What if you're right? What if we can make this work? I just need to know you're committed to me." "I am," he said, leaning closer. "I want you to stay. I want to build a life with you. We can face whatever comes our way, as long as we do it together. No more secrets, no more running away." Ingrid nodded, the weight of her fears beginning to lift. "Okay, I'll think about it," she whispered, hope flickering in her chest. Lars smiled, relief washing over him. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere, Ingrid. You have my heart, and I'll do everything to show you that." She leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth radiate from him, a stark contrast to the chill in the air. "I need to believe that, Lars. I really do." "Then let me prove it to you," he said, his voice filled with determination. He leaned in, capturing her lips with his in a gentle kiss. It was soft at first, filled with uncertainty, but it quickly deepened, igniting the passion that had been building between them. When they finally pulled apart, Ingrid looked into his eyes, feeling a surge of hope. "I want this, Lars. I want us." He grinned, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Then let's take it one day at a time. We'll face whatever comes our way together." Ingrid nodded, her heart swelling with love and determination. Together, as they embraced, the park around them faded into the background, the chaos of their lives momentarily forgotten. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn, they made a silent promise to one another. No matter the challenges ahead, they would face them side by side, ready to carve out a life filled with love, laughter, and hope. Together, Lars held Ingrid close, his thoughts brimming with newfound clarity. He knew this was the beginning of something greater, a new chapter not only for him but also for Lucas. Ingrid's presence had reignited a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Nearby, Lucas came running toward them, his small hands clutching a handful of colorful leaves. His voice rang out with excitement. "Look, I found treasure," he exclaimed, his face beaming with pride. Ingrid crouched down to meet him, her laughter blending with his. "That's a beautiful treasure, Lucas," she said warmly, taking the leaves from his hands as if they were precious jewels. Lars watched them, his chest swelling with a mix of love and gratitude. He joined them, wrapping an arm around Lucas while Ingrid held the treasure with a smile. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant hues of autumn, they stood together as if the world beyond the park had disappeared. For the first time in years, Lars felt the weight of his past lift. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building something meaningful. A future filled with love, laughter, and hope lay ahead, and for the first time, he believed they could achieve it together.